We were sitting down to dinner, my mother talking about bills, my father cutting meat. The phone on the table vibrated. On the screen, "Get up and leave. Don't say anything to your parents." I looked down at my plate and silently put down my fork. My name is Olivia. I'm sitting at dinner with my parents. There's chicken, potatoes, and green salad on the table. Everything looks like we're a family that can talk and listen to each other. But it's really an illusion. I know this all too well. Their words are not about caring. Their words are about control. Mother adjusts the tablecloth, tells me I look tired again. Her tone is soft, but it hides an accusation. My father looks at me over his glasses and reminds me that if I'd listened to their advice, life would be easier. To them, I'm always the person who's wrong. To them, I'm a convenient target. The phone lies next to me. It vibrates. I look down. The message, "Get up and leave. Don't say anything to your parents." I reread the text 3 times. My fingers get cold. The room feels cramped, like the walls have moved closer. My parents keep talking, not even noticing that I've frozen. My mother complains about the neighbor. My father criticizes the news. Their world spins on its own. I am off to the side. The phone vibrates again. A new message. "Don't ask questions. Just come out now." I raise my eyes to my parents. They're arguing about who forgot to pay the utility bill. Their voices blend into the background. My presence doesn't change anything. I'm just a figure at the table, an extra detail in their familiar ritual. I put down my fork. The plate is half full. I say thank you. It's delicious. Mother nods as if accepting the report. Father grins. At least we know better than you do. The phone shakes again. Olivia, don't delay. I get up. Calmly. Without explanation. They don't notice. They care more about their own lines. I walk toward the hallway. Every step echoes heavy in my chest. I grab my coat, button the buttons. The air outside the door is cold. The city is deserted at night. The streetlights shine dimly. I open my phone again. There are no new messages. Just these 3. But they're enough. I take a step outside and realize. This is the beginning. I don't know what it is. But I do know that things have changed inside. I stand on the porch and hold my breath. Inside, the noise of dishes, my father's laughter, my mother's sighs remain. There is silence. Only the occasional footsteps of passers-by and the wind. I look at the screen. No new notifications. But the feeling of someone pushing me in the back won't let go. I decide to walk down the street. My sneakers thud on the asphalt. Every house here is familiar to me. I grew up in this neighborhood. But in the darkness, the facades seem alien. I walk slowly, but still I walk. Inside I wonder, who sent these messages and why? Why now? Recent conversations flash through my mind. My mother complained that I was spending too much on rent. My father implied that without their help, I'd be in debt by now. I didn't say anything. I was always silent. Their truth always spoke louder than mine. But today it was as if their words fell into the void. I heard something else, that short command, "Go away." I pull out my phone again. I scroll through the list of messages. The sender is unsigned. The number is familiar, but I can't immediately remember whose. It's unsettling. I take a screenshot. I save it, just in case. I return my gaze to the windows of the house. My mother and father are still sitting there, having not noticed me leaving. They haven't even looked out. To them, my place at the table is a formality. To them, I'm part of the furniture. As long as I fulfill my role, they're calm. When I disappear, they don't even look up. It's funny and bitter at the same time. The phone vibrates again. Don't come back. I grit my teeth. I feel a strange calmness building in my chest. Not panic, but clarity. I realize there's not a threat behind that text. There's something else behind it. Perhaps a warning. Perhaps a chance. I walk down the street. I pass the old store where I used to work as a cashier. I remember my father saying, "It's not a job, it's a waste of time." I didn't argue back then. But it was there that I learned to appreciate my strength. And it was there that I first felt that I could make my own decisions. Couple walks by. The man says something to the woman. She laughs loudly, sincerely. I catch myself that I can't remember the last time I laughed like that. At my parents' house, laughter was always a weapon. They laughed at me, at my choices, at my words. Never with me. The phone shakes again. Olivia, get in a cab. Don't just stand in the street. I stop under a streetlight. The number is still the same. There's a strange feeling inside. On the one hand, irritation. I'm not used to being bossed around. On the other, realization. If I hadn't gotten out, I'd still be sitting at the desk, listening to their accusations. I open the app. The car will be here in 5 minutes. I wait. Passers-by walk by. One man squints as if I'm lost. I avert my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I belong right here on the cold sidewalk, not in my parents' warm kitchen. It's ironic. The house that was supposed to be a refuge has become a cage. The street is the exit. A cab pulls up. The driver rolls down the window. You called. I nod. I get in the back seat. He asks, where are we going? I open my mouth, but I don't know what to say. Then I say, to the train station. He nods, turns on the meter. The car starts. I look out the window. My parents' house is behind me. The lights in the windows are on as always. They don't care. They haven't even noticed I've gone. The cabin smells of tobacco and mint gum. The driver is silent, and I'm grateful for that. I check my phone again. No messages. Just these short orders. I think, maybe it's a mistake. Maybe the message wasn't for me. But then I remember it had my name on it. So there's no chance of coincidence. I think of my parents. I think about how my mother once said, you never make the right decisions. And my father added, your mother and I always know best. Those words stick in my memory more than any shouting. A shout can be ignored. But a quiet conviction, repeated dozens of times, becomes the truth. At least that's what they hoped. I look at my hands. They are not trembling. Surprisingly calm. I feel for the first time in years that I've taken a step not for them but for myself. And that feeling is stronger than any explanation. The cab turns down a wide street. Ahead are the lights of the train station. The driver says, we'll be there in a couple minutes. I nod. The phone vibrates again. You're on the right track. I close my eyes and take a deep breath. There's an emptiness in my chest. But that emptiness isn't fear. It's a place for something new. What happened next changed everything. Subscribe and stay. You don't want to miss how it unfolded. The cab stopped at the train station. I got out and breathed in the cold air. There were a lot of people. Some were carrying suitcases, some were waiting with flowers, some were smoking at the entrance. I stood among them, but I felt I was separate. The phone vibrated again. Take the ticket. I'll meet you there. I walked up to the ticket office, said the first direction that came to mind. The ticket was in my hand a minute later. The paper was warm, as if it already contained the solution. I looked at it and felt a strange calmness. The uncertainty remained, but with it came a clarity. I was no longer going back to the place that had always kept me down. The waiting room was noisy. A baby was crying, an old man was grumbling at a salesman, someone was laughing loudly into a phone. I sat down in the corner and put my ticket next to me. The phone lit up again. You're doing the right thing. The words were short, but there was more encouragement in them than I'd heard from my parents in the last 10 years. I remembered their conversations. They used to say that I was too emotional, that I was too naive, that I would never make it without them. It all sounded like the truth until I left home. Now every word they said seemed hollow, ridiculous even. When you look from afar, you see reality differently. The train was delayed. I went outside. I sat on the concrete fence and looked at the road. Cars were passing by. No one knew what was happening to me. And it was a relief. For the first time in years, I could sit without explanation. Not have to prove anything to anyone. The phone vibrated again. Stay close to people. Don't be alone. I grinned. It was funny to hear that when I'd grown up in a house where I wasn't physically alone, but loneliness was everywhere. You could sit around a table with your family and be more alone than you could be on an empty street at 2 in the morning. The station announced boarding again. I entered the carriage. I sat by the window. People around me were unpacking, looking for seats. I held my bag on my lap. There was almost nothing in it, just my passport, wallet, and phone. Everything I'd taken. Everything I needed. My father always said, "You're too frivolous. You could end up with nothing at any moment. It's funny. And now I've done exactly that. And for the first time I'm at peace. The train started. I looked out the window. The lights of the houses flickered on and off. The phone lit up again. You're on the right track. It felt lighter in my chest. Like it was confirmation that I no longer belonged to the words I'd heard back home. A few minutes later, a man in his mid-50s sat down next to me. He was breathing heavily and smelled of tobacco. He set the bag on the floor and talked to himself, grumbling about prices and neighbors. I looked at him out of the corner of my eye and thought, this is what fatigue looks like, a way of life. And suddenly I realized that I had been following the same path for the past few years. Sitting in my parents' house, listening to their complaints, and gradually turning into a copy of this picture. I closed my eyes. Scenes flashed through my mind. My mother checking my bills. My father, who calls and reminds me to make good decisions. Their habit of speaking for me and about me, even when I'm silent around them. It's like they always knew best. And I always agreed. Today that's all changed. Today I just got up and left. The phone lit up again. Don't talk too much. Stay calm. I grinned. I didn't have much to talk about as it was. For too many years I'd been silent. But now silence isn't about submission. Now it's about choice. The train stopped at a small station. New passengers entered. A family with 2 children. The woman scolded her husband for forgetting things. The children were laughing, pushing. I looked at them and caught myself thinking, every family has its usual scenes. In ours it was reproaches, pressure, and eternal reminders of my mistakes. They rarely laughed. More often it was judgment. I opened the window and breathed in the cold air. It felt like with each passing minute the distance between me and that house was growing, not only physically, but also inwardly. It was as if I was slowly stepping out of my old role. I remembered one evening. My mother had said then, "Olivia, you always do everything wrong. If you listened to us, you'd have a better life." I nodded then, just because there was no point in arguing. Dad picked up on it. "You owe it to yourself to be grateful. We've done everything for you." Those words sounded like a sentence. Gratitude was synonymous with submission. If I didn't agree, I was a traitor. In the darkness of the carriage, these memories were especially clear. But instead of pain, I felt something new. A rich calm. I realized that their words no longer had power. They are not carrying me on the train, not holding my hand. I am alone. And for the first time, it's not about loneliness, it's about freedom. The phone lit up again. Don't hesitate. Those 2 words hit harder than my parents' long speeches. Sometimes all it takes is a short phrase that becomes a pillar. I looked at my hands. I remembered my mother saying, "You don't know how to cope. You're failing at everything." Funny. I'm on a train right now with a small bag and a few things. And it's not falling over. Everything is standing. Everything is moving. For the first time, I'm driving myself instead of following their voice. In the seat next to me, a man snored loudly. I smiled with the edge of my lips. Life never gets perfect. But it has a strange logic. Once you stop waiting for approval, everything stops seeming so hard. The train slowed at a major station. People were getting off, others were getting on. I stepped out into the corridor to stretch. My face was reflected in the window. Tired but calm. Nearby, a woman was talking into the phone. "You left me alone again, and I'm pulling everything on me." I heard and involuntarily grinned. Other people's conversations sounded like echoes of my own life. Always someone pulling, always someone demanding. I returned to my seat. The phone vibrated again. "I'll explain everything soon. You need to be safe." Those words were alarming. Safe. So this was more serious than I thought. But I felt no fear. Only a firm decision not to go back. I remembered my father once saying, "If it weren't for us, you'd be on the street by now." I hadn't said a word then. But now, sitting on the train, I realized that the street was no scarier than their eternal reproaches. It's scarier than staying in a house where every step you take is a mistake. I took out my passport. I flipped through the pages. It was my document, my name. Not their signature, not their control. I looked at it for the first time as a symbol that I had the right to go my own way. And that right didn't need to be proven to anyone. The train jerked again. I closed my eyes and listened to the clatter of the wheels. There was more honesty in that sound than what my parents had said to me in all the past years. The wheels aren't judging. They're just driving forward. I looked out the window. The lights of the little station flashed past. Beyond them, the darkness of the fields. I thought that's what my past looked like. Lights with nothing behind them. And ahead the unknown. But the unknown was easier. The phone vibrated again. You're closer than you think. I put it on my lap and didn't answer it again. Sometimes it's enough to just sit in silence and know, the choice has been made. And it's the right one. The train rocked evenly. The people around me were falling asleep. I sat with my eyes open. There was no sleep inside. Only the feeling that I was finally awake. This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Subscribe now to see the hero put everyone in their place. The train stopped at the terminus. I stepped out onto the platform. The air was cold, damp. People were leaving. I stood there, clutching my phone in my hand. The message came at once. I'm here. I saw a man at the exit. I knew his face. He approached quickly but without fuss. All he said was, "You did the right thing." I nodded. He opened the car door and we drove off. We were silent for a few minutes. Then he spoke. Explained that he'd seen the paperwork. My parents were trying to make a deal on an apartment. My name was on it, but the signature was forged. They wanted to disenfranchise me. It was all done quietly, as if I were a line in their calculations. I listened and didn't interrupt. There was no surprise. More like confirmation. I'd always known their concern was control. Now I had a fact. The paperwork, the signatures, their decision. Not talk but action. He said, "We'll have to see a lawyer. Cancel the whole thing. And close the powers of attorney." I said, "Okay." And that was it. Inside I already knew. I wasn't going back to the role they had imposed on me. The next day I went to the office. Signed the papers. Revoked my access. Closed my accounts. Everything was done calmly. The lawyer talked about the details, I just nodded. For me it wasn't a legal process, it was a point. It was the end. I no longer had to explain anything to them. My parents called. First demanding. Then insistent. Then almost panicked. "Olivia, you owe us an explanation." Her mother's voice shook, but not with pain but with anger. Father was saying, "We've done everything for you. You're ungrateful." I was silent. The phone rang but I didn't answer. The last message came in the evening. "Without us, you're nothing." I looked at the screen. I smiled faintly. And turned my phone off. I sat by the window drinking tea. The silence was dense. But it was my silence. And it was worth more than any of their words. I remembered how a few years ago they had insisted I sign a power of attorney. "It's for convenience," Mother said. "We're family. It'll be easier for us to help you." I agreed then. Back then I still believed the word family meant something in common. Now I saw that it meant only one thing, control. Under the guise of caring, they took what they wanted. I walked through town and thought about how many decisions I'd given them. Every purchase was discussed. Every bill was checked. They were used to knowing more about my life than I knew myself. When I started working, they said, "Don't waste it, we'll tell you how to do it right." When I got an apartment, they said, "It's temporary. You'll have to come back anyway." Even my relationship was discussed. My mother once said, "He's no good for you. You should listen to us." And that was it. I didn't say anything then. Now I don't. I looked at my notes. There were several items in the notebook. Lock down accesses. Change accounts. Make copies of documents. It all looked simple, but inside I knew. This wasn't about finances. It's about reclaiming my right to live without permanent authorization. I was no longer a girl being told what to wear or where to go. I came home and spread the papers out on the table. I turned on the light. On every page was my name, but not my handwriting. "It's amazing how easily strangers can write your life for you," the lawyer said. "We need to act fast." I nodded. No emotion. Just one step at a time. The calls didn't stop. The phone vibrated almost every half hour. My mother spoke calmly at first. "Olivia, we need to talk. You've got it all wrong." Then her voice became harsh. "You're setting us up. You have no right to do this." I listened, but I didn't respond. Each new message sounded the same. Accusation under the guise of caring. I left my phone in the other room. I sat in a chair and just stared out the window. The city had a life of its own. People were rushing around, cars honking, lights blazing. No one knew that there was an invisible process going on in my apartment. Process of withdrawal. Process of separation. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just didn't participate anymore. One night my father did catch me on the line. His voice was loud, harsh. Are you crazy? Have you decided to cut yourself off from your family? Do you think you can handle this alone? I was silent. He repeated, You've always been weak. We kept you afloat. I replied briefly, There's no need to keep you afloat now. And hung up. It was the only time I ever said anything. After that, they started writing long letters. About how I'd betrayed them. That I took away their trust. That's not what a daughter does. I read, but nothing moved inside anymore. Those words had lost their power. Once they could make me justify myself. Not anymore. The lawyer called and said the papers had been canceled. Now they can't do anything without your consent. Those words sounded calm, but they meant more to me than he realized. This was the end of the old system. From this moment on, they no longer controlled me through bills or papers. I went outside. It was evening. I had an envelope in my hand with copies of the papers. I walked down the street and felt light. Not joy but lightness. As if a heavy weight that had been weighing me down for years had been lifted. People were rushing around, laughing, arguing. Everyone had their own story. I had my own. And for the first time there was no room for other people's signatures. Parents tried once more to get in touch. The last call was particularly telling. My mom was practically screaming. We did everything for you. You're ungrateful. You're denying us the right to be called your family. I sat with the phone in my hand and listened. Then I pressed the off button. The silence after her voice was louder than any words. I put the phone on silent mode. From that moment on, it ceased to be a conduit for their power. Became just a device. A tool for me, not a reason to control me. It was a small action, but it symbolized everything. I decide what to listen to and who to hear. The next day I woke up early. Sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee. The silence was unusual. No calls, no lines, no eternal you should. I opened the window. The street was buzzing with cars, but to me it was real silence. There was no mother's voice inside. No father's voice sounded. For the first time the silence was pure. I looked at the desk. There were papers on it, neatly folded in a folder. It was proof that I had taken a step. A small one, but a definitive one. I didn't have a sense of victory. It was something else. An admission of fact. I was no longer part of their system. In the evening I made tea again. Turned on the desk lamp. I sat by the window. My parents were writing another letter. It was accusations, threats, pleas. All at once. They vacillated between the roles of judge, victim, savior. But I didn't respond. I just deleted the letter. The phone went silent. The apartment became quiet. I put my cup on the windowsill and looked outside. People were walking by. No one knew what had just happened. But for me it was the end. Not a loud one, not a dramatic one. A quiet end. Just what I needed. I turned off the lights and stayed in the dark. It was my darkness. My choice. And in that silence I realized, I don't live for them anymore. I live for me. I took a deep breath. It was empty inside, but it was the right kind of empty. Not fear or pain. It was a place for something new. For myself.